Welcome back to the channel. Do you remember a couple of years ago when I talked about how Cody and Robyn truly seem to believe they're more spiritual, more evolved, and more enlightened than everyone else? Almost like Cody sees himself as some kind of mouthpiece for God, getting messages, getting prophecies, and Robyn fully buys into that idea. Together, they act as if they're mentally elevated above other people, like they're on a higher plane. And honestly, it's always felt a little creepy, very cult-like. Well, in last night's show, they didn't just hint at it, they flat out exposed it. And I don't love using strong words, but there's no other way to say it. Their delusional views were on full display. All of it focused around Cody's so-called apology, where he claimed he had to release the women. Release them. As if it's 2026, and women are still property that need legal permission to leave. And of course, Suki was totally useless here. She let Cody, this narcissist with a full-blown God complex, spin the story like the women needed to be released, when in fact, they were the ones who left him. Let that sink in. Yep, that actually happened. Now David was angry. And honestly, I like David. I really do. Because David sees Cody exactly for who he is. He has Cody clocked down to the smallest detail. He knows how Cody thinks, what motivates him, why he says what he says, and what he's really feeling underneath it all. David has him figured out completely. Meanwhile, Janelle is still sadly buying into the act. Because of that NDA, she's still trying to convince herself that Cody's apology was real. It wasn't. Not even close. It was Christine and David who brought the real energy, the kind that revealed what's actually going on. They pulled the curtain back on Cody and Robyn's cult-like marriage and the power wrapped up inside it. Last night, Cody didn't just slip up. He fully exposed himself as a cult boss. And here's the part that really got me. Everyone agreed that David needed to be there to make sure Cody didn't do anything wrong. Which raises a pretty troubling question. What were they expecting Cody to do? I mean, Janelle and Mary both met with him secretly before, and while he didn't do anything outright shocking, let's be honest, he tried. He absolutely tried. He flirted hard with Janelle. There's really no way around that. But putting that aside for a moment, whether you personally think David should have been there or not doesn't even matter. He was invited. So this whole fight about should David have been there is honestly pointless. He didn't just show up unannounced. He was asked to be there. Then Cody starts saying that David doesn't have the right to have an opinion about him because he doesn't really know him. According to Cody, David only thinks he knows him. And that's when David finally speaks up, and what he says actually makes a lot of sense. So let's flip the case for a second. Imagine this is you and your husband. You're out at dinner with your husband's ex-wife, and suddenly, that ex-wife starts gushing, talking about how much she loved him, how wonderful their relationship was, how magical and beautiful the whole experience felt. She's reminiscing about their journey, reflecting on how great it all was, and how deeply she loved him. Now stop and think clearly for a moment. What does that sound like? Because that's not an excuse. That's someone trying to plant seeds. Seeds that say, I still have feelings for you. And if you're truly sorry, you don't talk like that. Everyone watching knew it. The moment Cody opened his mouth and started saying that nonsense, it was clear. This wasn't sorrow. It was venom. It was completely wrong. Cody has absolutely no limits. None. And it doesn't matter whether it's your ex-wife, your ex-husband, or someone else's ex. If you're married, that kind of exchange is off limits. Cody going around and having these emotional, flirtatious talks with multiple women while Robyn is his wife is wildly inappropriate. And here's the real problem Cody has with David. David isn't naive. He spent decades around arrogant, narcissistic, polygamist guys just like Cody, because his own sisters were married to them. David identifies the behavior. He's seen it before, and that's exactly why Cody can't stand him. And David knows exactly how these men work. He knows how they act. He knows how they treat women. That's why he can test them, because he understands the game. He knows why he's in that room. For example, if Cody had said something easy like, hey, do you want to hang out in Moab sometime? That would actually show a real interest in reconciliation. That would be an attempt to move things forward. Because if you truly want to change, and you actually want to do better, you take steps, you invest, You invest in the life of your ex and her husband. You try to bridge the gap, especially when you still share a young child. Christine has a young girl with Cody, and David is now her stepfather. He's helping raise Cody's child. Wouldn't a healthy adult person want to know the man who's helping raise their kid? But Cody didn't want that, and the reason is simple. This was never about healing. It was about Cody, his ego, his control, his goals. David is right. And then there's the obvious question David asked that no one else seems to push hard enough. Why isn't Robyn there? Why is she always missing when Cody is having these talks with his ex-wives? Doesn't she care about what her husband is doing or saying? And to this day, the answer seems to be no. Robyn's answer has always been the same. She wanted plural marriage, and because of that, she says Cody's relationships with other women have nothing to do with her. Let that sink in. What? What makes it even stranger is that while she says this, her facial expressions tell a totally different story. You can see it on her face. She knows it's wrong. She recognizes how wrong it is, and yet she still defends it. She even goes as far as to say something like, well, if David were enlightened enough, he would understand that hearing those statements would help Christine heal. What? Christine left Cody. Cody didn't end things. She walked away from him. Why on earth would Christine need to hear Cody say, I did love you? That's control dressed up as care. What does any of that have to do with why Christine actually left? It doesn't, not even a little. Christine didn't leave because she needed resolution, or some poetic confession of love. She left because Cody treated her badly. She left because he ignored her children. She left because he didn't show up for his daughter's surgery. She left because his mistakes nearly cost their daughter her life. She left because for years, he financially abused her. He mentally wore her down. So how does Cody saying, I did love you, heal any of that? The only reason someone says something like that is if they believe they're above other people, if they see that person as property, if they think there's some kind of higher being, almost godlike, whose words carry healing power. And if you don't understand that logic, well then, in their minds, you're just not enlightened or evolved enough to be on the same spiritual road as Cody and Robyn. That's the attitude we're dealing with here. David also pointed out something else that's hard to ignore. Robyn says she wants polygamy, yet she never shows up for the things that directly involve her husband. She avoids the family talks. She avoids the ex-family talks. She keeps herself separate, despite asking for polygamy for years. So what she really seems to want is the idea of polygamy, without any of the duty or discomfort that comes with it. And right there, Suki makes it clear. Robyn truly thinks that if David were more enlightened, he would simply accept all of this. And I loved David's answer. He shut it down instantly. He basically said, that doesn't make any sense. I'm logical, I have common sense, and that is neither reasonable nor common sense. What David was really calling out is this manufactured story Cody and Robyn tell themselves, this idea that they're so spiritually advanced that normal rules don't apply to them. He even laughed at the idea of them being so enlightened. Meanwhile, Suki was working hard, trying to twist things in a way that might make Cody and Robyn's perspective seem reasonable. But the harder she tried, the more obvious it became. It just doesn't hold up. Now, to be fair, I will say this. Mary would sometimes consider this nonsense. Janelle would too, at times. But David wasn't having any of it. His attitude was basically, don't even bring me into this mess. These views are ridiculous, and the way they think and talk is not normal. And then Cody takes it even further. He actually says that if he wants to tell Christine that he still loves her, he will. Period. End of talk. Honestly, I need that clip saved forever, because that moment is going down in Sister Wives history. Then comes the part that makes your brain short-circuit. Cody says, it wasn't a lie, but it wasn't true. Let me say that again. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't true. Ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly the definition of a lie. If something isn't true, and you still say it, that's called lying. And then he follows it up with, when I said I didn't love her, that wasn't a lie, it wasn't true. What? How does Suki sit across from him and keep a straight face? I remember someone once telling me that Cody has an incredibly high opinion of himself, that he truly sees himself as a famous, important celebrity. And honestly, that explains a lot. Because when he made that comment about David working in construction and talking about things I don't talk about, it fell the same way as Robyn saying, well, maybe if he were more enlightened, he would understand. Both of them are saying the same thing in different ways. David is too stupid to get it. In their minds, David just can't comprehend what's really happening because he doesn't understand how special Cody is, or how powerful and healing Cody's words are when he says something like, I loved you. And then Cody doubles down. He says, if I want to say to Christine today that I love her. Today, in the present tense. Let that sink in. Cody even says he'd have no problem going up to Christine and telling her, I love you. And in his mind, that wouldn't break any kind of bro code or cross any lines. Just like that. No concern for boundaries. No concern for truth. And then Suki turns around and brings that message back to David. She actually acts like a go-between, relaying Cody's arguments instead of letting the adults in the room speak directly to each other. Why does she need to be the referee here? Why can't they just have an open conversation? Watching her shuttle texts back and forth is honestly ridiculous. But the thing is, David wasn't moved at all by what Cody said. Not even a little. In fact, David made it clear that he doesn't want to understand Cody, because Cody is so far gone. David refuses to entertain this kind of rhetoric because he sees it for what it is, abusive and deeply misogynistic. And this brings me to something that has always worried me about TLC's choices. Why do they keep putting women in the position of hiring Cody? And I use the word journalist very loosely here, because there's no real journalism going. They're putting a female interviewer in a situation where she's expected to help justify and normalize misogynistic and frankly dangerous ideas about women. Ideas that strip women of their liberty. Ideas that treat women like property. Ideas that in the real world lead to women being harmed, trafficked, controlled, and pushed into serving under men. That's the weight of what's being danced around here. And TLC plays a role in that when they ask a woman to support what Cody wants. David doesn't even want to entertain the conversation about whether this is misogynistic, because to him, it's obvious. Now, someone commented on one of my latest videos and said, did you notice David said he would never allow Christine to go there, or that he never would have agreed to it? And they called that a giant red flag. And I said, okay, let's actually talk about that. Because here's the reality. Cody Brown is an abuser. He's a dangerous man, a man known to have all kinds of guns. A man who has made it very clear that he doesn't think the law applies to him, or that he needs to follow it at all. Time and time again, he's shown that he has no problem abusing people, using people, and hurting people if it helps him get what he wants. He has no respect for other people's humanity, no respect for their personality, no respect for them as human beings. In Cody's world, no one has rights except Cody, and that's exactly why David says, I don't even want to consider his point of view, because that point of view is poison. It's rude. When David says Cody is so far out in left field, that's what he means. This thinking is so warped, so unhealthy, that it's not worth dealing with. But Suki keeps pressing him. She keeps trying to get David to understand, and honestly, it's frightening. It's disturbing to watch her relay this information to the husband of a woman who escaped an abuser, and then ask that husband to accept the abuser's argument. Think about what she's actually asking him to accept. She's presenting the idea that the abusive ex-husband thinks the only way his ex-wife can move on is if he releases her, if he gives permission, if he tells her, I did love you, so that now, finally, she can heal. Do you hear how misogynistic that sounds? How cruel that sounds? And it's all being wrapped up in this so-called spiritual excuse. Well, this was his testimony. God told him he had to do this. What God? What heaven? What God would want a man to have 4 wives, financially abuse them, neglect their children, refuse to pay child support, refuse to pay for health insurance, barely see his kids, maybe once every few days, sometimes only a few times a month, leave women living close to poverty, and then put them on a reality show where he benefits financially from their suffering? That's exploitation. He takes money from all of them and uses it to fund his own lifestyle. so he can spoil the newest wife he brought onto the show for ratings. And then TLC turns around and asks the husband of the woman who escaped that abuse to accept the idea that only Cody has the power to free her, even though she's already married, even though she's been married for more than 2 years, even though she's been with David for over 3. What? I'm pretty sure the day Christine married David, she was done with Cody, completely and forever. And let's be real, if she still had lasting emotional ties or unfinished business with Cody, she wouldn't have gotten married. People don't move on like that unless they're already gone mentally. Christine and Cody's relationship had been broken for years, nearly a decade. So this idea that she's somehow newly single, confused, or unable to move on without Cody's permission is ridiculous. Come on. And then to force David to pressure him to accept this narrative? That's rude. Full stop. It's abusive on TLC's part to put these women, and now their partners, in this situation. I was recently talking to someone who's loosely related to Mary, and they told me something really telling. There are people in Mary's life, friends, who are begging her to leave the show and totally cut ties with Cody. Why? Because as long as he's still involved in her life in any way, he still has access to her, and he can still abuse her. And this case is a perfect example of that. This is how Cody is still hurting Christine, and by extension, abusing her husband. David is totally right to call this out for what it is. Because listen to what's being said. Suki is effectively asking David, is that what he said? That the only way she can be released is if he lets her? Released? What is she? A slave? Does he own her? Is she property? Because that's exactly how these women are treated. Like property. Like servants. Expected to work, live, and create at the command of one man. And finally, someone on this show says it out loud. Someone calls it exactly what it is. Cody treats these women like property. He had no claim over Christine. None. He never formally married her. He never had formal rights over her, ever. She does not need his permission to do anything. She doesn't need him to say a single word for her to move on. And he absolutely does not get to pick when or how she heals. Now, I'm sure Christine still carries trauma from that event. Of course she does. But that doesn't mean she isn't allowed to be in a new, healthy relationship. She is over Cody. That doesn't mean she's over what he did to her. And those are two very different things. What he did was cruel. And here's something abusers love to do. They tell the person they abuse to stop talking about the abuse. And happily, that's not happening here. Thank goodness Christine has a good husband. Truly. It was such a relief to see that, to hear David stand up, speak clearly, and not back down. And let me tell you, this is only going to get hotter next week. Watching David go toe-to-toe with Cody and Robyn, calling them out, and showing just how delusional and unhealthy they really are, it's eye-opening. What we're finally seeing is the dark side of polygamy, the sick, twisted, truly disturbing reality that's been hiding in plain sight. Cody is a creep, and so is Robyn. I'd love to know what you think. Tell me your ideas in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and click the bell so you never miss a movie. Thanks so much for watching.